You are now listening to the Serious Growth Podcast with your host, Leo Costa Jr.
Well, hello, everyone. This is Leo Costa Jr. coming to you from SeriousGrowth.com. Today on our show, we have somebody named Zhane. Zhane, how are you?
Good. How are you doing?
Oh, I'm doing well. I want to get clarification here. We talked before the show started. Zhane?
Yes, Zhane.
Zhane. Now, I'm going to assume that's French.
Yeah, it is.
It is. What does it mean?
I have no idea, to be honest with you. My parents saw it, loved it, ran with it.
Yeah.
Now, unfortunately, first day of school for me was just always super tough.
No kidding. I mean, is that the way how do you spell Zhane?
Zhane.
Yeah, that would be a tough one, huh? You probably got oh yeah. I could see that. So then I see it as Zane, Z-A-N-E, and I was thinking even that is unusual I've never heard that before. You know? So Zhane, I like that name. That's a really cool name.
Thanks.
It's way better than Leo. Let me tell you that right now. I didn't start liking my name until I was about 40. You know, I just hated it. Anyway, okay. So today we're going to talk to you a little bit about in the inside on women's pro basketball. That's kind of what I want to end up talking about. But before we get into that, I would just like to, I'm obviously interested on what led you to that sport. And with that being said, how old were you when you got involved in sports?
So I got involved with sports at a really young age. I mean, my brothers would always joke with me and call me their little brother because I was just so active, always wanted to play outside with the boys, didn't want to touch Barbies or anything like that. So I was playing sports, very young, 5 years old.
Wow. Okay. So that was mainly horsing around with your brothers.
Yeah.
Okay. And then,
exactly.
And then when you finally got into a sport, you were how old and what sports did you actually get involved in?
So I was heavily involved with both soccer and basketball at a really young age. I think I started playing both organized around 7 years old.
Yeah.
I fell in love with both sports, and then I went on and played throughout high school. And then it boiled down to, college. I had offers to go Division I, both basketball and soccer. I just fell in love with the game of the basketball a little bit more.
Yeah. So when you started, I think personally, now just a little bit about my background. I'm a strength and conditioning coach as well. My background's in bodybuilding. I got into that side of it first, but I was an athlete all my life. So the stuff that I got into kind of was, they just kind of fell into each other a little bit because they're all based in athletics to some degree. But one of the things I got into was sports-specific conditioning. And so I worked with a lot of athletes. And one of the things that I noticed, like when you said when you first got started in sports, was it through school? Like you were involved on a school team or something like that?
Yeah, exactly. It was through school to start and then, moved on to club sport.
Okay. And that's kind of the direction that my kids took too. Were your parents, were they athletes themselves?
Yeah, so my father played football for a long time throughout high school, college, and then professionally for a little bit. So he kind of knew the ropes and was very helpful to get me to where I needed to go.
Yeah, where did he play professional football?
He played, I want to say, for the Raiders for a little bit, and then the Rams, and now he's done.
Yeah,
it was years ago. He's an old man now.
Well, that sport takes it out of you pretty quickly. I think
he didn't stay long, just for a few seasons.
Yeah, I think the average lifespan of a pro football player is 4.5 years. I mean, so these guys that go past that is unusual. So you had that in your background. Was your mom an athlete as well?
Not at all. She was not an athlete, but she was a numbers woman. So she's very successful in the business field now. So
okay. So, but as a family, okay, so you had your dad who was like really into it, knew the ropes, and I assume that your mom was very supportive.
Very supportive. I mean, they both went to all my games, college. They didn't miss a game. They were very supportive. Yeah. And then my brothers, I think secretly, obviously, hopefully they don't hear this ever. They wanted to play sports. They just weren't as gifted as I was, so they didn't last.
Oh, well, I mean, not everybody's equal. That's just the way things go sometimes, Exactly. So, one of the things that as I was raising my kids in sport, they started very young, just like you did. And one of the things that I learned once I took a trip to Eastern Bloc, I learned about sports specific training, and the mistake that was being made, like when my kids were coming through, was that coaches had a tendency to want to isolate kids and have them only play just one sport.
Right.
When I was playing sports, we played all three sports, but when club came along, it seemed like that people started specializing more, and that was actually, that worked counterproductive actually to the athlete, because it's really important to develop all aspects of your, how your body works, and doing different sports forces you to develop different characteristics. And so it sounds like with you had two sports that you were playing.
Yeah. So yeah, I definitely agree. I think people sometimes overlook the fact that different sports can help strengthen you within different aspects of the game, depending on which sport you kind of want to head towards.
Yeah.
I ran track. I forgot about track, but I hated it, but I did it all throughout high school, and it really helped me stay in shape.
Yeah.
And that's little things like the shape that you'll get in playing soccer and running track is completely different than when you play basketball. But because of that, I was then able to last a lot longer on the basketball court.
Well, and what you're saying is really interesting about what I know about the physiology. You just made a point. Your body is so specific in the way it adapts to its environment. And that environment can be a work environment. It can be an athletic environment, because you think, some people say, well, you're this in-shape basketball player, in-shape soccer player, but yet when you go out and play a totally different sport, you're wiped out. But that's just how specific that your body is adapting to that particular sport, so I understand that.
Exactly.
So when you were playing basketball, when did it get really competitive for you? So I assume that when it got to club, did it start getting a lot more serious there?
Yeah. So, growing up, it wasn't all that serious. I just knew that I loved it. And I always played on guys' teams because my father felt like it would challenge me a little bit more.
Yeah.
I did that kind of, throughout elementary levels, middle school. And then when I got to high school, I was living still in Las Vegas where I grew up, but I actually played on a club team that was based out of Los Angeles because of the competition, the exposure that I would get. Everything was completely different.
Yeah.
And so essentially I would move to Los Angeles every summer to play basketball, to be in front of, as many eyes as possible. And that's when I realized, this wasn't just a game for me anymore, and this could really be my future.
Yeah. So when that happened, then what kind of changes did you actually make? Okay, we know that it got more competitive. Right. And I understand that. I'm correlating that with my kids. When they got to that level, it was like all of a sudden you're playing around a bunch of people that are pretty talented. At some point, they're all talented, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. So as you're going up the ranks, how did you set yourself apart? I mean, if everybody is talented, so how did you make you stand apart from the people that were trying to compete for the same position that you were?
Right. So I think my father, again, he kind of helped set me apart at a really young age. I mean, the discipline aspect is huge. It's one of the most important parts. Growing up, if I wanted to go out to the movies or, go to a party or what have you, whatever with my friends, he would tell me, well, you got to get in the gym and put, 1,000 shots up before you go anywhere.
Yeah.
And when I first heard that, I was like, are you kidding me? That's absurd.
Yeah.
But it's the little things like that's what's going to matter to set you apart. So I would say my discipline changed completely. I mean, I gave up my entire summers at home where all my friends are and where I'm comfortable to then step into a completely new world and play against some of the best of the best. So, I really had to master the art of being uncomfortable, because when you're comfortable, you're not growing and you're not learning anything, versus being uncomfortable, you're challenged, you're growing, you're meeting new people, you're in front of the audience that you want to be in front of. So the biggest thing was just discipline and uncomfortability, mastering that.
Yeah.
And also, you know, my strength and conditioning and my diet was very important. I worked out 7 days a week. Granted, those 7 days weren't all go, 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 hard, 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 but I was definitely in the gym every single day. And I definitely wasn't eating these, you know, dollar menu, Happy Meal, this, junk, that, alongside my friends. I really had to set myself apart and eat clean to refuel my body.
You know, and the thing about that is you're saying so many things that are exactly, in my opinion, the formula, and what most of the athletes that end up going, you know, the furthest are the people that have the exact formula and the strategy that your dad initially set for you. So important, you know, and most people don't realize the sacrifice that athletes make sometimes, you know, they just don't really get that. And because you do give up a lot, you give up a lot of your, you know, your being young and some of the things that kids do at that age. And, but the good news is that you knew what you wanted, you know, and I don't know about you, but this is something that sets you up for the rest of your life, because you keep drawing back. I draw back to a lot of things, you know, in my life because of the sports that I got involved in. It really developed a lot of everyday life skills. Would you agree with that?
Oh, totally. I mean, because of that, it has definitely helped shape me to who I am today.
Yeah.
I know we talked briefly about this previously. Now I'm a real estate agent here in San Francisco. And I mean, I would have never expected to be in this position today, selling multi-million-dollar homes and doing it well.
Yeah.
I recently was nominated to be one of the rising stars in Bay Area real estate. So kind of like the young ones coming up and making a difference in the industry. And I was just thinking back, like, wow, it wasn't even a testament to what I did real estate wise, but it was truly just teaching myself that discipline at a young age and going through sports that really helped me be where I am today.
Because it applies, you know, it just applies all the way. And I can tell you, because I'm much older than you are, this is like the biggest life lesson that you have ever learned. And you'll appreciate that more as you're going along, you know, because just life is not always just like sports. It's not always rosy. You're not always at the top of your game. Sometimes you're benched, you know, there's your adversity. What are you going to do with that? You know, and it's how you respond to that. Because if you think that you're going to go and you're going to be a superstar all the way through that process, you're living in la la land. It doesn't work that way, you know?
Exactly.
So you got to have something really strong in that base and that foundation that you can draw from, you know. That's really cool. So let me ask you this, and this might be a little bit controversial, and because I have my opinion on it. You said that your dad had you playing like on the boys teams, okay?
Yeah.
So, and I understand why he did that, okay? But here's what my question is: do you think that girls should play on a men's sport? Like, for example, I know there's a lady, I think she played on the soccer team, and she's maybe trying to kick for one of the NFL teams. Is that correct? Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So what's your opinion about that? Do you think that women should play in men's sports?
You know what? I think there's a lot of controversy right now going on with both male and females in sports in general. You know, the biggest controversy of them all right now, especially just WNBA to NBA, is people made a comment like Steph Curry is going to make more than the entire WNBA as a whole, salary-wise this year. And, you know, there's a lot of talk back and forth about how women should make a little bit more and be a little bit closer to what men make. And, you know, I'm not necessarily fully in agreement on that, because I now am a numbers woman in the business field, and I understand that more goes into just, hey, females should be paid equally as males, right? And I think it all boils down to the exposure and how much the WNBA is getting exposure-wise to bring in the revenue to then allow these females to make more. And it boils down to females and women in general just don't support each other enough. Women want to go watch the guys play. They want to go to these male sports games, and that's fine.
Yeah.
But once women start supporting women more, it'll really bring value to women in sports. And on that note, talking about should females play on male teams? I think absolutely, why not? And I think it's only a matter of time before that starts happening. More and more, we're now seeing female coaches on the NBA side, on the NFL side. And I know there's just a few and far between right now, but I think over the years, that is going to grow more and more, and they're going to start letting women in on the sports.
Yeah. And I think the reason why I brought that up is because I'm flashing back now to my kid was he was in 7th or 8th grade, and he was a wrestler. And lo and behold, the person that he had to wrestle that day was a girl.
Wow.
And and maybe it's just the age thing at that stage. 13-year-old boy, right. I'm not saying that. Listen, if the girl is talented enough, I think you're right. Why shouldn't they? But in this particular case, it's like my kid didn't want to. He's like, I don't know how to put my arm around her, and it was really awkward. And I thought at that point, that's really unfair. To put, I don't know if it bothered her as much as it bothered him, to be honest with you. But I just thought, why don't we just keep it to where girls wrestle girls and guys wrestle guys? I was really torn between that, So I'm not necessarily opposed to that, but in some cases, I think that maybe they should just stay. You play your sports, your gender, and that's of course. We can always go back and forth, and there'll always be an opinion about that. But one thing that you said, which I think is the driving factor, is now the pay for what you do, because it's a numbers game. If women can get more exposure, I think that's really the key, because where's the money going to come from? Right. You got to have sponsors, and there's got to be ways to generate that money. But you said something that was kind of interesting, I think. You said that women aren't really supporting women as much as the guys do. Is that what you said? I don't want to put words in your mouth.
Yeah, so what I'm saying is women just don't support women in sports enough in general, right? Like, I think if women that don't play sports don't understand the value in it. But if women supported other women in sports as much as they support men in sports, we would then at least bring in a lot more exposure that can then turn into revenue, endorsements, and what have you. But because I'm not saying that males don't have to support females in sports, but at minimum, you would think it'd be a little bit easier for females to relate to one another and want to support one another.
You would think so. So
you would hope, but that's not the case just yet.
Yeah. So then how do you change that dynamic? Is it through education? How do you do that?
I think it's a mix of both, a little bit through education and a little bit through, word of mouth and what we put out there on the media. So I think if these endorsers can start to appreciate and understand the value in having women be the face of certain things, that could help, because it won't only help bring, support around females in sports, but it will then allow other women that aren't in sports, at least empower them and show them that they can also be leaders in the world.
So I'm assuming that the women, obviously, in soccer this year did fantastic. Do you think exposure like that helps the cause that you're talking about?
Absolutely. I think the more we as women and females and athletes in sports can step up to the plate and put ourselves out there like the female soccer team did, it's great, because it had probably empowered so many different women on different levels in different fields.
Oh, yeah. That's got to be inspirational. Even to the young ones. And that's interesting. Yeah. Well, let me see. Then, okay. So let's go back to now let's go into high school. You did club. Mm-hmm. You got into high school. So I'm assuming that basketball was still your main sport in high school. Did you, you said you did 2 sports or? Yeah.
So basketball was more of my main sport in high school. Because, I, again, had to choose a little bit. I still played club soccer that was outside of high school, but I knew in order to get the exposure that was necessary, I went to a pretty well-known private high school in Las Vegas, Bishop Gorman High School, and they were known for their sports. And I knew if I was going to be seen and put on the stage that I needed to play on the school team. So I played both on the school team and then in Los Angeles during the summertime.
Okay.
Club.
All right. Now, so you get to that point. Now, as far as training, you said you're going to the gym. So how did you get your background in training?
Yeah. So growing up, I didn't really have a great support system in training and sports and conditioning until I got at like a competitive level. So on our club team, we had sports and agility trainers just an all around health trainer to deal with, injuries and such. And same thing in high school. So it was really just looking up to the trainers that I had and tapping into the resources I had, and just trying to become the best I could be. And we would have regular basketball practice and then sports and agility practice either before or after. So it was a completely separate deal, which I thought was very important.
Yeah. Did you do any weight training?
Oh, absolutely. So I lifted weights from, high school on, here and there in middle school, but not seriously. I got really serious. I would say more so in college. That's when things really took off for me, weightlifting wise.
So with that being said, now at that point, did you have a strength coach that worked with you?
Absolutely. So we were in the weight room every single day, obviously, rotating what body parts we worked on, etc. But I was in there every single day. And that's when I really learned about my body and what it was going to take to be the best I could possibly be.
Yeah. And then with that being said, because it's important to have when you're training like that, you're putting your body under a lot of stress. And what about your diet? How did you handle your diet being in college?
Yeah, so our team had a dietitian that was constantly with us, a nutritionist that would literally tell us what to eat and what not to eat. And then we would get a meal a day called training table that essentially was set up for us after practice with, whether it was always just a protein, a vegetable, and a carb, rotated, but they would kind of tell us what portions we should be getting. And there was this huge, it was very strict depending on our body fat, our weight, our height, telling us how much we should eat and how many times a day.
Yeah.
So it was very strict.
That's good. When I was, I went back to, like I said, during my day, we didn't have strength coaches. I mean, not even at the college level. You had an assistant coach that handled the weight training. But in those days, it was like, okay, I played football. So it's like, okay, this weight training is just for linemen. The rest of you guys just go do something else. There wasn't enough information to know how specific training could really benefit your sport.
And I definitely felt when I was eating right and recovering right versus when I wasn't.
Yeah. When you put yourself under that kind of stress, you're going to feel the difference. There's no doubt about that. So you were training 7 days a week in the gym, you said?
Yeah, 7 days a week. And I don't want that to sound like I was just going super hard 7 days a week.
Yeah.
Realistically, 2 out of those 7 days were more so what we called recovery lifts. And I'm sure you know kind of a lot about that.
Yeah.
More stretching, lighter weights, just kind of maintenance stuff.
Yeah, we call that active recovery.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it gives you, because you're only as good as your recovery. So it's, okay, that sounds very smart. So after you played high school ball, did you get like a scholarship to go to college?
Yes. So I had both soccer and basketball, many offers kind of on the table. And then I ended up choosing the University of San Francisco, which is in the WCC. So we played like Gonzaga, BYU, teams like that. And I chose that and everyone looked at me crazy. Like, Z, why of all the schools, why this school? And to be honest with you, it's sad, but it's so true. But I knew that even whether or not I make it at the professional level, I'm not going to be this multi-millionaire playing the sport that I love. Mm-hmm. And everything isn't about money, but I knew at some point down the road, I would have to get a career. And at the time I was heavily interested and still am in business finance. And that college happened to have a top 25 ranked Forbes best business schools in the nation. So that's what really led me there. And when I got there, they were terrible. They only won 5 games the year before I arrived, but that's kind of almost what excited me. In high school, I went to a high school that we won state every single year, not a whole lot of adversity. And I'm big on facing adversity because that's really what helps you grow.
Yeah.
And I wanted to go somewhere where I could really build a program and not just be another number at a program that's always at the top.
Well, I think you're just ahead of your time a little bit for being at that age. It's like you knew that. And some people won't understand that because some kids just go to school for sport and they don't think about their career. And for somebody your age that was doing that, obviously you're kind of ahead of your time, so to speak. I think you made the right decision because you were there for the right reasons,
Right.
Speaking of, competition, and one of the things that I had a guy, he's a mentor of mine that he's now passed away, but he told me one time, he said, Leo, because I was going out of high school, I was going to a college where the quarterback before me had broken all kinds of records. He was a freshman. When I went to that school, he was a sophomore. I was an incoming freshman. So I had a great senior year in high school. And of course, you're going up the ladder and you're meeting stiffer competition. And he told me one time, he said, look, when you go in, because he could tell that I was a bit nervous about that, it's like, and I wasn't used to not starting. I was always a starter. I mean, I got benched here and there, but for the most part, I was a guy. And this is kind of like a step up. And I'd be lying if I didn't think I was concerned about that,
Right.
And he told me this. He gave me some advice, and I want to get into how you handled yours. But he said, look, when first of all, when you step on the field, okay, it's a different relationship that you have with those people on that field compared to when you step off that field. He said, when you step in the lines, it's all about competing, and it's all about winning a job, Right. And he said, and some of the Jedi tactics that you can do, he was telling me, he said, when you line up to do sprints, he said, wherever your competition is, you be right next to him. Wherever you go, wherever he goes, you go. You're going to be his shadow. This is what he was telling me, And so let me ask you this now. So now you're rising up the ranks, and maybe I'm assuming you had to fight for a position. How did you handle that dynamic? How did you handle that, being friendly with your teammates versus I'm gonna take you out because I want to win that job.
It's funny because when I got there, I think they all kind of knew, Z's going to take over. I think that's what everyone's thought process was. But for me, little of me, freshman, going up to this big university, I was not thinking confidently whatsoever. I was just like, I know I've got to go out there and get it.
Yeah.
And my biggest goal was, I want to start. I want to play as many minutes as possible. I want to start. And I thought I was going to be, more of a shooting guard on the wing versus a point guard, but ended up they were like, hey, we really need someone that's going to be a leader and take over, and we want you to be that position. So I then completely shifted gears a little bit and became a point guard there at the university. And the girl who was still there, that was the starting point guard 3 years before me, obviously did not take that well. And we ended up, no matter how friendly I was, because when I stepped into those lines, it was business.
Yeah.
I didn't care who it was. If you're in my way, I'm going to run you over until I get to where I want to be.
That's what I'm saying right there.
So I did just that every single day. And that obviously caused a lot of uncomfortability with my relationship with me and that girl on the team.
Yeah.
So not only that, but a lot of the girls on the team started to not really be friendly with me. And I figured, okay, well, it is what it is. I didn't take offense to it. I was just still there like, this is business for me. We don't have to be friends. We just need to get along. And then I realized, my first year, by the way, I took over, played a lot of minutes, but we didn't win a lot of games. And I was like, it's all about the culture, right? Yeah. There should be no reason we all dislike each other over some playing time. Until we come together, we're not going to win.
Yeah.
So as the years progressed, we started getting along a little bit better, started winning more games. And then my senior year was when we really took off. I mean, we all got along, the culture, and we all felt like one, which was the first time in my 4 years there. And then I led the team on to winning our conference, which was pretty much unheard of. Gonzaga or BYU typically won the conference every year while I was there. So we were definitely like a shock to the conference for us winning. We played in the NCAA tournament. I mean, we did amazing things that year, and it all brings back to this one moment of me realizing, hey, we've definitely got to get along. So, I mean, I went through all of that for years, just trying to earn my stripes. But it all boils down to being able to not only step in on the court and make sure it means business, but still be able to build these fruitful relationships with your teammates.
And that's a hard thing to do, especially when you're the newcomer coming in and you got, this lady that's been there 2 years before, she's going to have her own friends and own following. It's like, who in the hell is this? Who does she think she is? I can only imagine that, because that's the same way in men's sports, and we call it being really competitive. And it's an interesting dynamic, because you have to play together, and yet off the field stuff goes on as well as in the field and on the field. And those things can transfer over and can either be a positive or negative influence.
Exactly.
So you're the new person coming in. So how did you deal with that? I mean, I would imagine that you felt like maybe you were a palm tree on an island,
Absolutely.
Right? And,
I felt alone, but I had one other girl who's now my best friend till this day, who is a very talented player as well. She was a freshman, and she came in with me, and we both kind of did the same thing. Took over, kind of earned starting positions, and it was kind of like us two against the world.
There you go. Yeah,
the whole team was kind of on our backs and not really, supportive of it.
Yeah.
I definitely felt like it was us two little palm trees on an island. But the moment I stopped letting that bother me was the moment I really started excelling. Because I was playing pretty well, but I wasn't reaching my fullest and highest potential until I said, the hell with it. Whether they want to get along with me right now or not, it's still business.
Yeah.
So I try to stay focused on my own craft and help improving my game, which then allowed me to kind of tune out that negative energy. But also, the moment they saw that it no longer bothered us, they then started to come back in and become this team we should have always been.
Yeah. And I think that's really, what you're basically telling me, two things. Number one, what you did, my perspective and my definition of what you did was compartmentalize. You compartmentalized the stuff that was going, within the girls that you were playing basketball with. You were isolating that, and because too many people let that stuff bleed over, and it does exactly what you are mentioning. It can impact your play when you're worried about what so and so thinks of me, instead of saying, look, it's easy to say that's not my issue, it's hers. And the minute you let that bleed into her issue, making it your issue, she's won. She's done exactly what she's intended to do with you, is to tear you down. And I just tell you, most people don't really understand how damn hard that is to do that. It's way easier said than done. And something you said in the beginning of the show was learning how to be uncomfortable in those and be comfortable in an uncomfortable situation. That certainly doesn't happen overnight, does it?
It doesn't. It's not easy, but it's probably the best lesson I could ever give and teach anyone, because now when I get in uncomfortable situations, I don't fold and panic. I just relax and understand that it's a growing process. It's a learning experience. And I really just embrace it at this point.
And it's so much of this, everything is just a mindset, how you deal with that. And like I said, just the way you talk is just all that stuff that you're doing. You, by nature, it seems to me that you're a leader. Would you say that you were the, I don't know if is it correct to say the alpha on your team?
Totally. Yeah, I was a team captain for all the years, leader. I'm not one that holds back. I speak everything.
Yeah. And I think that's important. It's hard to do because too many people are worried about what other people are going to think.
Right.
And I don't think you should necessarily in that situation, it's kind of like being in the line of work that I'm at, with my people. One of the things I do, the people that work for me, and even my clients, they know where I stand. It's pretty black and white. If you're not able to handle that, well, you've got a couple of options, but you're always going to know where I stand. And I think what's most important, and I think that based on what you're saying, that it was happening, you were doing it for the betterment of the team, to make the team better.
Exactly.
It wasn't about you necessarily, even though you might be alpha and you might be that person that likes adulation. But I think at the end of the day, what you're telling me, it was about making the team better, and this is what we have to do. You in or out?
Exactly.
I mean, it's pretty simple,
Period.
Yeah. So, okay. So now you've gotten through college and you've become a starter, and it sounds like you guys did really well. So now what's the next step? Now, like with my kid, I had one of my sons got drafted in baseball. He played for Cal State Fullerton. Well, if you know anything about Fullerton, they're a powerhouse in baseball. Well, he got drafted as a junior out of Cal State Fullerton. Now, in men's baseball like that, it's really important you got to make this thing all hit right. Like on your junior year, ideally, you want to have your best season because that's when the pros are starting to draft you. And from one year to the next, your draft position drops way off. So how does that work like with you now? Do they draft women to what's the women's?
Yeah, so there's WNBA. There's two professional avenues you can go on with basketball on the female side. And it's the same thing for males. There's WNBA and then there's EuroLeague, which is essentially playing overseas in Europe.
Right.
The biggest difference I would say is I think the money is a lot better in Europe versus in the WNBA.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't see it for any sort of money opportunity. For me, it was just more so I liked the avenue of playing in Europe because I could essentially travel the world and play the sport that I love on someone else's dime, which is very hard to come by.
Yeah.
So how it happens is, so all throughout college, I would have agents constantly contacting me, like sports agents, saying that they wanted to represent me. And I didn't really start getting serious and start entertaining them until the moment I graduated from college. I then signed up with a sports agency and an agent. And then essentially they do all of the talking. So the players are left out of the salary negotiations and contract negotiations. It's truly just my agent was talking to all the professional teams coaches in Europe. And then my agent would bring me contracts, salary negotiations, etc. And then I would choose from there.
I see. And why do you think that the women in Europe are making more money at that sport than the women in America?
Truly because the sport over in Europe gets a lot more exposure and a lot more support, I would say.
Yeah.
Like WNBA games, there's a lot of people at the games and it's a decent crowd, but it's nothing like playing in Europe. It's definitely a lot more well-known over there. So
I wonder if it has something to do with, like, of course, the NBA is a very popular sport, obviously, and they get a lot of, again, exposure.
Right.
Do the men in the professional basketball in Europe, do they get the kind of exposure like we do in the U.S. compared to?
Yeah.
So is it more equal? Is it more equal that way as far as exposure for men and women in Europe then in basketball?
I see. Still not equal. I would still say the men get a lot more exposure in Europe than the females do. But it's definitely a lot less of a margin in Europe versus here in the States.
Okay. So then when you went over to, so you actually finished school. Did you graduate then?
Yep. I graduated from USF and then I went on and played in Germany, China, and Poland, each for a season.
Okay. And when you were over there, were you by yourself? Did you get drafted with somebody?
So that was definitely, it was definitely a scary experience to say the least, because here I am. Now my mother, from Italy, I have traveled a lot, especially over that way to visit family, etc. But I've never really just packed up my stuff and moved to another country all by myself in places where English is not the first language.
Right.
I mean, it was challenging.
Oh yeah.
Talk about being uncomfortable. I probably grown up so much in that short amount of time living on my own overseas than I did my entire life.
What's amazing about the human spirit is that, we don't realize how much we're capable of doing until we're put in certain circumstances. And that's a good example of that, because I know, man, when you're in a different country like that, when I traveled over to Bulgaria in the late 80s, and there was one damn person that spoke English. I mean, my goodness,
Totally.
Yeah. So, but you figure, look, you're in a spot that you either have to figure it out, you either adapt or die, so to speak. So you went to Germany, huh?
Yeah. So over there, I was actually taking German lessons. I still can't tell you more than 3 words in German, but I tried, because I was like, I've got to learn at least the basics or else I'm not going to survive.
Yeah. No, seriously. I know what you mean. I've done a lot of traveling myself over there. in places like that. So how was it to okay? So the team that you were on in Germany. Now, were these girls from all over the world? Were you the only one from the U.S.? I suspect.
Yeah. So how it works is each team is allowed to have 2 Americans unless you have dual citizenship. So in my case, being Italian and American, I could then get dual citizenship.
Got it.
Americans that have dual citizenship can play on a team and not count as one of the 2 Americans.
Oh.
So that's kind of like the goal when you play overseas, because once you can gain dual citizenship, you become that much more valuable, because typically the Americans were a little bit more skilled than the Europeans. So that's why they only allow 2 per team. But in my case, funny enough, I played with one of my biggest competitors and a girl that I look up to in so many ways. Her name's Hayden Palmer. She played at Gonzaga. So we were in the same conference and battling each other. The only difference was I was a freshman when she was a senior. So everyone kind of talked about how, Z is going to be the new Hayden. And we ended up on the same team together overseas, which is hilarious.
Really?
Yeah.
I'll be darned. So when you were playing in Germany like that, what town were you or city were you in Germany?
I was in a city called Herne, which is a very small town, which definitely did not help for my transition. And it was the closest to the biggest city near me was Cologne, which you might have heard of.
Yeah, I have.
In Germany. So I was close to there, about 45 minutes from there. Also like a 2-hour drive to Amsterdam.
Yeah.
So I was near a lot of cool places, which made it very fun.
Yeah. So as far as being on a team where you're the only American, or yet there was another American, the girl from Gonzaga. Right. Okay, so you had somebody that you could communicate with, obviously. But how did you communicate with the rest of the team?
So the rest of the team, thankfully enough, all spoke English.
Yeah.
And that's another thing I learned. When I traveled to Europe, I realized how lazy we are as Americans in a sense of caring to know other languages, because they were all pretty much decently fluent in English.
Yeah.
A little bit of language barriers here and there, but they were essentially my translators, because my coach couldn't coach to me in English.
Yeah.
So I was constantly having a translator by my side throughout the entire experience.
That's a whole different way to learn basketball, right?
Oh man, and the way they think and look at the game is completely different too. So it was crazy.
To say culture shock, that actually does exist.
Oh yeah, that was a shock for sure.
And even the way that you say, like the way as Americans, the way we think about certain things that could be funny, they don't think it's funny, and vice versa. Right. And it's like, what the hell? The way I got a lot of that when I was over there, but I tell you, just like what you said, it really is a growing experience. So now when you played like that, did you guys travel much, or was it just pretty local? Did you fly?
Yeah, so we traveled a lot. Essentially, like any pro team would, you're on the road every week, every other week.
Yeah.
So either, driving or flying.
Yeah.
Off.
Did you guys, how many games a year did you play?
So we played about 30 games a year, 30 games in a season.
Yeah. And how long was the season as far as months wise? Is it 3 months, 4 months?
Months wise, it was from about September or late August until about April.
Okay. And then what did you do in the off season?
So in the off season, I would come home in the States here for about 3 months. And I wasn't always in Las Vegas. I was wherever my trainer was at the time. So I spent summers in LA, in Vegas, here in the Bay Area, kind of wherever the best trainer for me was at that time.
Yeah. And you're living in Vegas now?
I'm living in San Francisco.
Oh, I mean, San Francisco. That's right. You're from Vegas, but you're living in San Francisco. Okay. Right. So when you go back to second year, where was that? Where'd you go play then?
So China. That was a completely different experience in terms of talk about a culture shock. The hardest part for me was the teammates, I also did not speak English, so it was very tough.
Yeah.
Just, communicating every day. I did have a translator, but I definitely felt the most isolated there.
Did you have an American speaking athlete on that team as well?
Yes, I had one.
Okay, so, and then you went back then the following year, and then you played, where'd you say, in Poland?
Poland, yes.
And how was it there?
Poland was good. It was cold, the cold, all that extremely different again.
Yeah.
But there they were also great English speakers, which made it kind of easy, because at least I had a group of girls, a group of teammates that I could socialize with,
Oh,
and not
yeah.
just, crazy.
And of those three teams, which one did you like playing on the most?
Definitely the team in Germany, and I think it's because Germany was truly the closest to what felt like home for me here in the States.
Yeah.
Very Americanized over there, so I probably enjoyed that the most, and it also helped knowing people on my team from previous.
Yeah. And then now you're okay. So it's really 3 years, 3 different teams.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what made you? I want to ask you something. How tall are you?
I'm 5'9".
Oh, 5'9". Okay, is that pretty tall for a forward?
No,
is that short?
It's not short, very short, but definitely smaller. Point guards on teams are usually the shorties.
Yeah.
And
okay. So now you're back in now San Francisco. And
yes.
So what's your okay, so this is something your pro career is everything has gone and went, so to speak, and you're transitioning to, sounds like, the real estate. So what's in it for you now in the next 5 years? What do you see yourself going? Are you going to be in real estate for the rest of your life, or what?
Likely so. So I work for a company now called The Agency, and they are incredible. I couldn't complain in any way. I love what I do here. I sell homes here in San Francisco, homes and buildings. 5 years from now, I probably see myself transitioning into maybe becoming more of an independent leader role, having my own team here. But I want to get into development. So whether it's flipping homes or, building developments, I essentially want to take the cash that I earn from selling real estate and then investing that back into my own business in flipping and developing homes.
Sounds like a plan, and you never know how. Hey, here's one thing that I learned, Zhane, was that for me, it was about following passion,
Totally.
And that was one of the best things I ever, and I learned that kind of the hard way, because my dream was to be a pro athlete. I mean, that was more than anything that I wanted, was to be a professional football player, Well, long story short, it didn't happen for me, but it happened to actually for both of my kids. My one son played for the Kansas City Royals
awesome.
after Cal State Fullerton, and my youngest son actually played pro football in Spain. So he had the European, he had that experience, But one of the things I promised myself, because I after my senior year of school, I had an injury, and I thought, you know what, this is maybe a sign. I maybe should go back to the old family dairy and do what, in my culture, Portuguese is kind of like handed down, and I was so unhappy. And, it got to the point where I was miserable, working on the dairy, and I just kept thinking of, how I let myself down because I didn't try to reach my full potential. And I think that was that's really important, but I did promise myself that if I ever had something that I had passion for, that I wouldn't question that, I was going to go on that path. And me being at this age and you're where you're at, if I was to tell you, and I can feel your passion, I can feel what you're doing, you love doing it. I think if you just keep that as one of your number one or two priorities, it's to follow your passion. Everything else falls into place, man. It's hard to beat. I'm so lucky now being this age. I'm 64, and I love my work as much, if not more, than I did when I first started out.
That's awesome.
You don't realize how important that is until you get down the road a little bit,
Yeah.
And
absolutely.
And I feel you. I feel that you have, you've got a really good outlook. You've got a good energy about you, and there's no question in my mind. I think you'll reach whatever goal that you want. And you got that strong athletic background to help you through, right?
That's important.
Yeah. Anyway, so listen, we can wrap this baby up. I just want to really thank you for coming on. I've worked with. In my line of work, I work with lots of athletes, but I've never worked with a professional or a female basketball player.
Awesome.
So I think you've given us some insight. And again, I just really appreciate you coming on the program today.
No problem. Thank you so much.
Okay.
And good luck. And I'll definitely follow Kara and ask how things are going. She's very happy there. So.
Maybe when I'm in San Francisco, I'll look you up.
Yeah.
Okay.
Absolutely do that.
Okay. You take care of yourself.
Take care.
Okay. Bye-bye.